So I will send everyone a link to a PDF that has all of the slides in the chat box in just one moment. But first, we just want to officially welcome you to the webinar today. I'm Andrea Wieters. I'm with ASAE and I'm with the ASAE Research Foundation, so I'm happy to help you and walk you along. If you have any specific questions or tech concerns, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom. We don't have time for Q&A. However, we will address those questions in future communications. You'll also notice at the bottom of your screen the closed captioning, which you can put on at any moment, and we'll also be recording this session for use at later events. I believe that's it from my end. If I've forgotten anything, I hope Lemmy will help me out, but I'm just going to turn it right over to you, Lemmy.
All right, great. Thanks, Andrea. Hi, I'm Lenny McNeely, and thanks to the ASAE Research Foundation for hosting this session and supporting research on innovation. And our speaker for today is Barry Barisi. He's going to share information with us that's really, really important. So, Barry?
Thanks so much, Lenny, and welcome also to our expert panel. You'll be meeting Tom, Francesco, Randy. Obviously, you've met Lemmy already. They're going to be joining us at two different points in the session today. The goals for today include these 4 elements. I'm looking forward to introduce to you the 8 key elements critical for business venture success. We're going to highlight how to use this assessment tool to diagnose problems and challenges for your organization to achieve business venture readiness and set the stage for those of you who will be joining us for future workshops. We hope that the experts we've assembled today will inspire you to embrace impact innovation and propel your social impact journey and efforts to generate new revenue. And most importantly, this is the beginning of a learning adventure, and we hope this motivates you to keep reading and getting more familiar with our resources. I first want to talk about diagnosis. This is a mantra that is really behind our effort. The fact that readiness diagnosis can inspire and inform innovation change management. And I want to spend a couple minutes explaining why I'm so passionate about this. So these are pictures not from actually where I work, but it represents sort of my roots for the first 20 years of my career. I was a practicing clinician working in community health centers, serving underserved communities in Boston, New York, and Los Angeles. And this was a typical experience for me of starting the day, welcoming patients, but feeling this tremendous sense of purpose and engagement with my team. That experience taught me a number of things about healthcare, but it got me very obsessed with the notion of diagnosis to the point where I ended up producing a textbook early on. This is actually a quote from my textbook early in my career, and it underlines my belief of the importance in diagnosis. The reason was in my training, I learned early on that so many patients came to me, not because they did not get the correct treatment, but because they weren't properly diagnosed. So I took that passion for diagnosis, and when I became involved in my academic career and moved into graduate studies at NYU, and I was a dean of a campus of State University of New York, and worked in Massachusetts in health centers. That experience where I transitioned from a clinician to being more of an administrator, I became very interested in organizational diagnosis as a way of determining strengths and weaknesses in an organization to help guide me as a leader in making improvements in service delivery and impact and value creation. And then when I moved into the 2 roles that I've had as a chief executive in an association, both at the American Optometric Association and AIGA Design, that carried me forward. So organizational diagnosis is very much part of the way I think about things. And in this slide, it just emphasizes that back in 2016, when I formed my consultancy, we committed our firm to this very premise, that organizational diagnosis can be an informed approach to discover, build, and grow your business innovation platform as an association. Now, along with that experience, I figured I better have some foundation or pillars to that whole discipline, much like I did clinically. It's not just experientially. So as I experienced the opportunity to do more diagnosis and leadership on that basis, I built a body of work, and this is outlined in the early parts of the ASAE Foundation monograph that we produced on business innovation. And so you can go into that material and see, believe there's around 20 citations of the core literature that came from the most part from a category of literature called social entrepreneurship, which has been built up over the last 20 years from the nonprofit service sector, as well as literature from the association space. But there was much more depth and work done formally about innovation, impact innovation, and business-related innovation within nonprofits in the service sector. So this is a simple way of expressing the basic concept of readiness diagnosis, which we're going to refer to at different points in the session today. First is the diagnostic process identifies those areas of readiness that you're strongest at and those that need improvement. And then it can trigger your intervention of capacity improvement on a targeted basis. So you can decide to go after the area you're weakest in or the areas you're less weak in. It's your choice. And then you can measure your level of readiness over time and determine your status and progress going forward. In 2019, I began collaborating with ASAE. Lemmy was very much part of that. I'm so appreciative to the whole team at ASAE Research for giving me this opportunity to validate our model and dig deeper into the specific operational issues of healthcare and of related areas of work. And that's a chance where we validated the model, and that is outlined in the body of work that was released back last year, last spring, which we'll refer to later. But that was a turning point to move this forward and getting the work we've done on the larger platform. It has 5 elements. I know this is a lot to consume in one reading. It's 90 pages, but obviously I'm very excited about the collaborators that I worked with and ASAE support in producing this body of work. And if you don't have it already, please go to the ASAE website and download it. It's free to members. And it'll be critical for those of you continuing on in our other workshops that you have this. Consider it your textbook for the remaining materials we're going to be covering. Within that manual, you have essentially a self-assessment tool. Now, those of you who downloaded your slides already, you'll have access to this. And it's an approach with each domain. So in this case, the example is foresight governance. 5 questions, you respond to the questions, you tally up the score, and you can create your percent score against the standard of best practice. And it gives you that point of a comparison. So you have in the handout today, the extraction of the tool that's available in the flow report. You can use that to do some homework and give yourself the test and determine where you stand against that best practice. If you take all 8 domains and you go through that instrument, you can then come up with a way you can compare your level of innovation readiness, your preparedness, your capacity to build business units that generate new revenue and clearly impact in a positive way your mission. In this profile, operational agility scored lower than the other areas below. So diverse talent is the higher performing area. So then when you have that profile, you can make that determination where you want to go next. Do you want to work on building up your capacity in some of the weaker areas, or do you want to leverage what you already are good at and use that as a basis for building new programs and services? We're now going to turn to our panelist discussion, and I'm going to go off screen here to a second. And we'll have our panelists join us. Are you able to join the session?
Are you waiting for us?
Yeah, if you can go ahead, because I'm not
Okay.
able to switch the screen off. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Francesco Day. I'm with the interventional cardiologist, and thank you, Barry, for inviting me to join you. He, I think, asked me to join as a panelist because my organization's been going through exactly this, both because it was our time to go through strategic planning, but also because I've been in associations for nearly 30 years now, and I've seen this evolution of membership expectations happening over time, and really feel as though it is do or die for associations at this point. I feel like there's been a confluence of changes that are really impacting associations and are going to have a significant impact if we don't evolve, and pretty soon. Looking at it, I think education has become much more of nearly a commodity in a lot of fields. Networking value is being challenged by social media. For-profit competitors are out there, and they're able to be more innovative and provide professional services in a lot of ways that we just can't keep up. We're not as nimble. We're smaller. We have fewer resources. But most significantly, the generations that are coming into the workforce now, the millennials and Gen Z, that are firmly in the workforce and really the future of our associations, have very different expectations of their membership than the earlier generations, and quite frankly, generations for the last 200 years of associations. I think if you look at what their expectations are, they're rooted in the fact that they grew up, they never had a world without internet and without immediate access to information. So when they're evaluating anything, joining anything, being part of anything, they're looking for they're evaluating it in a different way than in the past. They're evaluating it before they join, not after their mentor has told them to join. They're looking for immediate return on their investment. They're looking for tailored value proposition, not an umbrella of offerings. They're looking for impactful engagement right off the bat, not in their due time after they've been a member for a long time. And they're looking for hands-on opportunities to provide input. These are not things that traditional associations lend themselves to. And this confluence of changes in society and generational expectations has been sort of accelerated by the necessities of the pandemic, the fact that we've all been working from home and we've been forced to be more flexible, more dynamic, and do everything at the speed of light in a manner that millennials and Gen Z have been telling us we can do for a long time, and we've generally been resistant to. So I think at this point, with our traditional association governance and membership models, we are hindered from evolving in a way that we can address the needs and wants of future membership for our societies. And if we don't look at how to evolve now, we could potentially be extinct. So it is definitely very much time. We can't wait any longer. And if you're going to reinvent yourself, it is best to use proven tools. Diagnosis, as Barry has been talking about, is the key to really being able to identify what the path is that we need to take to reinvent ourselves and be prepared for this future of associations. At SCI, we've been, as I said, we're in the middle of the process. We started by examining and looking at what changes are occurring in our field and looking at how we uniquely can positively impact those changes. Now we're trying to identify what are some of the multifaceted ways that we can approach addressing those changes, being ahead of those changes and being there to support our members as those changes happen. And we're looking at things like partnerships, merging, for-profit endeavors, et cetera, sort of everything and anything. But to do that, we have to do it within the confines of our traditional membership and governance models. And that's where the challenge really comes in, because the leaders of a governance model that is in fact the governance model that's preventing us from doing what we need to do are not likely to want to change what has proven to work over time. So what they're trying to do now, so now what I'm doing is using these readiness tools and diagnostic tools to help them see that what has worked in the past may not be the path for the future. And hopefully will be a way that will ease the conversation and help them see that there is an appropriate and appropriateness and a necessity for change. Thank you. I think that's all I have right now.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Francesca. I'll just jump in with that. And I think it's great that I have the opportunity to follow you, because you'd mentioned that you'd been in the association biz for 30 years, and I've been in the biz for 3 years. So a little bit of a different perspective. And the way that I position this with my staff and with my board, and this is going to sound bad, and I don't want it to, but it's the truth, is, I talked to them about, let's not waste this crisis. Meaning that we are, I think, at an inflection point, and I know it's a term that's overused, but I do think it's relevant. And let's use this opportunity, this disruption, to make some tough decisions that maybe we haven't made in the past for whatever reasons, right? Political reasons, potentially. And use this opportunity to make maybe some transformational changes within the organization, which may not be necessarily palatable to all folks, but now we can justify it in the context of the disruption we're seeing in our environment. And I think it goes down to the business models, and the way that I, talk to the board, and the way that I lead my staff is, let's just assume that our current business model will fail us within the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to fail us. And under that paradigm, or under those circumstances, what do we need to do to diversify our business model in order to remain relevant and successful as an organization? And I think it is kind of this transformation that, associations, again, I've only been in the business for 3 years. I came from the profession, so I'm still very much learning. But I think we, as a profession or as an industry, need to move away from some of the slow waterfall-like approaches to how we approach organizational change, and really start to, and another term that's way overused and frequently not understood well, is be more agile. Meaning taking the opportunity to do experiments Instead of the waterfall, we plan 8 months to do something, and then we do it, and maybe it hits or maybe it's flat. How do we instead approach this through a series of experiments to determine whether or not these moves are going to be successful? And so moving that is in and of itself is a challenge. And as Francesco said, one of our greatest challenges is related to the governance, and it's really important to position the board. And this is where I like to scare my board and say, look, the ground underneath us is shifting in unprecedented ways. Let's look 3 to 5 years in the future. What do we need to do as an organization, and how can you, as the stewards of the organization, position us to be successful? And really thinking about, again, taking risk. And I know that many boards, including mine, have a risk aversion, but it's absolutely it's necessary now for us in order to be relevant and to be successful in a rapidly changing environment, to take risks and getting the board comfortable with risk taking and experimentation. The other piece that I think is really important, and this is where associations should have an edge, but don't always leverage this edge, it's around purpose, aligning the work that we do with our staff and with our volunteer leaders around purpose. And I see purpose as a force multiplier. I think, whether it's in the for-profit industry or whether it's in the not-for-profit industry, organizations and businesses that really do put time, energy, and focus on purpose are able to move the needle much more effectively than other organizations. And then the only other thing I'll add, because I think Francesco did such a great job, is around talent, right? And there's a lot of talk about diversity, and it is exceedingly important. But not think about it just about demographic diversity. Think about it from intellectual diversity. And what's that sweet spot of bringing people in to the staff side who may not come from the association industry, who can be disruptive, who can bring some different ideas and different experiences to the table, and partner with our traditional association leaders to shape and maybe transform our business models. Same thing with the governance model, and bringing volunteer leaders in who, again, we're talking about intellectual and demographic diversity, and it's really important if we're really going to be able to shift at scale in a pretty short period of time. So thanks again for the opportunity to present my perspective and some of my thoughts.
Thanks so much, both Francesca and Randy. This is exactly what I was looking for. I wanted the energy and the enthusiasm you folks bring. I didn't realize the dynamic of the two eras, Francesca and Randy, how you come from those different perspectives of time. But what you share is this passion for change. And obviously what we're pursuing in this series of presentations over the next couple of weeks is saying there is a point to get started. Diagnosis can help you get the lay of the land. In fact, when we started the project, the survey project back a couple of years ago with ASAE, we were responding to what we were hearing from the members. There were many member leaders who were saying, we want to do innovation, we want to develop new business lines, we want to pursue mission, generate new revenue. We're just not sure where to start. Well, this is what we're proposing. The way to start is do a diagnosis. Do a profile of your strengths and weaknesses as an organization. Use that as a starting point to determine where you're strong and where you're weak. And continue to reflect on your strengths and weaknesses, your capacity to do innovation as you move forward and tackle these elements. I absolutely believe that what you just heard about the criticality of the timing, this is an opportunity to reinvent the association model. And we're going to be covering a lot of the elements of how to do that. So we're now going to go back into the slide deck. So I'm going to be sharing my screen again. And give me a second to call it up. So this phase, we're now going to actually give you a sense of the flavor for the model itself. And there are 8 domains in this model. And you can go into the depth in the monograph. Each one of the monographs include, there are 4 monographs, and then the original one at the beginning to give you the overview. Each one of them go into detail in explaining each one of those. So the first of the 8 I want to talk about is foresight governance. And what you see on the screen are what we consider to be the descriptors of best practice. So it's a high standard, but it creates that threshold that you can make a comparison to. So you see here that foresight governance includes elements of point of view, understanding the opportunity to look for the upside of disruption. Isn't that what you just heard from Randy? Don't miss a crisis as an opportunity to make changes and to grow. And then that you're engaged in using some specific strategies. Obviously, the ASAE has developed a tremendous amount of resources in this particular space. And the flip side of that is what you have in each one of the ASAE reports is a outline of how to go about advancing and improving your capacity in each given domain. And then you'll see later how there's a series of articles available for free on Association Ventures Playbook. So advancing foresight, in our view, involves 3 things. To monitor the drivers of change, to understand it's important to have embedded in your governance activity that you're watching those indicators of the future, that you accept, and what Randy said about the purpose, accept the purpose of being innovative, and then to lead your organization's reinvention. So you'll see in these materials some specific ways to go about doing that. The next area of real importance, this is underlying so much of the capacity to do innovation, again, was referred to by both Francesca and Randy, is operational agility. And that's where you engage in projects that are clear, consistently applied and useful. You have criteria that guides your workforce. You use metrics. You understand risk and opportunity assessment. And you make decision-making responsive and agile at all levels. That means every single level of the organization has to embed the practices of agility from your board right down to your front line. And we're suggesting there's a number of ways that you can build that capacity if that happens to be one of the weaker areas. One of the underlying themes important here is the need to cultivate curiosity. It fuels an energy in your organization of willingness to accept change, to look for the better way. We propose ways to architect inner agility, adopt the agile method, and to scale change across the organization. These 2 elements of foresight governance and operational agility are going to be blended in our next workshop. We're going to be getting into the weeds about how to activate these 2 core domains to move your organization forward with agile governance. And that's to avoid it becoming an oxymoron. Governance can be agile, and we're going to talk about specific ways to do that. The other foundational area important for innovation capacity is having diverse talent. And that means clearly harnessing the power of diverse teams based upon backgrounds, race, perspectives, cultural experiences, skills. This is something that, in my own experience, I have been impressed with in the association space, coming from the clinical space, that associations are committed. Clearly, more can be done.
Hey, Barry, just to interrupt real quick, we're not seeing the presentation, so I'm going to share my screen and I'll click along with you, just letting you know.
I'm sorry, should have known that earlier.
No problem.
Let me check why. Okay, so you go to advanced empowerment culture. Am I in the right slide? Want to be an engaged ecosystem. So I can see that's nice. So empowerment culture. Empowerment culture is another element of importance, and it underlines, combined with diversity, the need to give energy and support to your staff, that they can act autonomously, that your association will be able to exhibit a fluid and efficient, vibrant exchange of ideas, and that your organization is always looking for creative ways to test your ideas, to learn from success, and understand when and how you're failing, so that you innovate, you take risks when they're needed, and you continually, I guess trust is a key term here. You trust your staff to make the right moves. Let's go to the next slide, please. And here's ways to grow your empowerment culture if this is an area based upon the diagnostic experience that you're weak in. Encourage debate, openness, willing to learn from your mistake, promoting in your actions, collaboration, and listening to those outside voices, opening the door to different points of view so that you can have a fluid exchange of ideas, and basically feed off that dynamism of people exchanging ideas and helping each other move forward. Next slide, please. Engaged ecosystem is something we're going to be talking about in the last series of in the series of the workshops, and that's about being adept at building your external partnerships. Many of you have great networks of sponsors and partners, but to view them as creating opportunities for new joint ventures, business relationships, other than the typical way we do things of having a sponsor. Oftentimes it's a one-way street. But to establish a set of priorities and programming that you really leverage your external networks to create game-changing innovations. And that becomes central to your organization's branding. This is one of the inherent strengths of associations, is that they're great conveners of networks of organizations and people. And this is an important area to leverage in the innovation space. Next slide. So we're suggesting that some of the fundamental ways you can improve your level of performance with engaged ecosystem is to establish the culture in the organization of being willing to look far and wide, to always be seeking that new perspective. And that's just not in your membership efforts, but in your efforts of looking around you in your environment. One of the examples I give is the importance to look at the startup space. A lot of great ideas are being produced in technology. Startups have great ideas. Sometimes they don't work out because they don't have the scale and the capacity to move them forward, but it's still an interesting way to refresh your own thinking and determine opportunities going forward. So clearly it's important to embrace new opportunities, to create value and sync with others, and to advance your leadership reputation. Next slide. Digital practices refers to something much more than your AMS or your LMS. This is about the broader opportunity that you have at your core, a commitment to building digital exchange and digital platforms that serve your membership. Now, to be more specific, some associations in the healthcare space have built digital practice activities with guidelines or with collecting clinical data. So there's real opportunities here to look beyond the typical data you collect through your AMS and look at opportunities to monitor, capture, and reinterpret data that represents your particular discipline. And then develop project teams within your organizations to look not just at the value of the data in their raw form, but how they could be implemented with partnerships into venture priorities. Next slide. And then here are some of the key areas, again, with the reading materials that we're showcasing today, that you can go forward and look at these materials and learn how to create value at the core of your organization, how digital services can integrate your functional units. And sometimes this means looking at tools outside of the realm of the AMS capacity. And then developing your workforce digital skills. So not only your core IT team, but the whole organization is motivated to learn more about digital innovation. Next slide. Catalytic leadership. This is an area that in our surveying of the health associations, the score was quite high, that there is a lot of visionary leadership, CEOs that are able to focus on the key priorities, that they're good about applying, providing full access to resources needed for venture development and flexible funding. And they have an insight and courage to maximize the organization's impact to serve members and greater good. This is inherently, we're finding, one of the core strengths of many associations that can leverage and move you forward. Next slide. And then here are some ways in the reading materials we have about how to go about strengthening your leadership with approaches to promoting an inspirational vision and how to nurture talent development. This is so much, I think the cornerstone or the measure, I would say, of a great leader is their ability to motivate, to mentor, to advance the skills of their own team, and then to provide data tools that can give feedback to those teams so they know how they're performing, they know how they're growing in their ability. Next slide. And collective purpose. Randy, I think you related to that directly. It's so important to have a strong sense of purpose. And I particularly don't use mission because that word is overused. Purpose, I think, is more meaningful. That refers, in my mind, to your entire staff being bound together with a robust set of shared values, and they agree on what's important, that the organization is highly focused on their organizational mission. And here's what's important. They can say no to program ideas that do not fit the mission. And the organization has a clear innovation strategy that aligns with the overall allocation of resources. Next slide. Advancing your collective purpose. It's about driving strategy, making sure you're guiding decisions, and this notion of innovating at the core of the organization, not at the periphery, not just by the board or by senior staff, but the organization is bound and motivated at the very core. Next slide. Now, what I've just been referring to in the advanced slides is the material that's available at this website. So you have the resource of the ASAE monograph. It provides you the diagnostic tools. It provides you the outline of the ways to advance your capacity in each one of those 8 domains. And we have a series of articles in this location, this medium publication, Association Ventures Playbook, that can supplement that material. Each of the resource articles are typically 5 to 6 minutes of reading time. And we feel it will give you that extra boost when you're trying to improve a particular area, a domain of capacity. I think we're going to be ready to go to our next panel of Tom and Lemmy, so we can shift to them on the screen.
Thanks, Barry. I'm Tom Serena, the CEO of the American Gastroenterological Association. Our story is one of putting the cart before the horse. A little over a year ago, we decided to deal with a concern we had about declining membership in several categories, and we formed 3 teams, each focusing on a different category. We had a big all-staff kickoff meeting, food, t-shirt, music, dancing elephants, the whole 9 yards. We had a flurry of activity as the groups got started, and the carts immediately got stuck in the mud. Different obstacles got in our way, not the least of which was everybody's day job. A few months into the project, Barry took us through the innovation readiness survey, and that's why I say we put the cart before the horse, because the results showed why we weren't ready to bite off such a big change project. The score showed we scored below 4 of the 8 readiness domains, and we were well short of the high performance standard. So we decided to focus on 2 domains, collective purpose and operational agility. So as Barry highlighted, there are 3 elements to collective purpose. That is that your staff has a shared set of values and they agree on what's important. The organization's focused and the organization has a clear innovation strategy. We had a little discussion before this meeting. I think many of us share boards who can't focus on a few things, let alone one thing. You try to be all things to all people. So we did 3 things to improve our collective purpose. 1, we did a relaunch with an overarching organization-wide initiative to focus on one group, those who were leaving fellowship going into practice, because so many of those members were lost in that transition. The second thing is we tightened up our accountability and transparency. We have a weekly all-staff scrum where we report the metrics of the project, and we also report to the board regularly. The third thing is that we decided that each program would be reviewed every 3 years and would not continue unless they were affirmatively approved for continuance. Not all rocket science, but we hadn't really pulled all that together in this way before. And I have to say, it hasn't really solved the problem of the multiple priorities, but it's a great demonstration project, especially for our board to see that you can make an impact. If you're focused, there is a start, a middle, and an end to each project. As far as having an innovation strategy, admittedly, that's something we have to turn our attention to. Moving on to operational agility, there are 4 components. One is that the project is clear, that you have criteria and processes in place, that you use metrics, and that you have agile decision-making. And it's not as if AGA was devoid of any of those, but we clearly weren't operating at the high performance standard. So the first thing we did was to create a project charter. Again, maybe self-evident in hindsight, but we didn't do a good job prior to that of answering the why, who, what, and when questions. And you would think that filling out a form like that wouldn't be difficult, but it's interesting to watch people struggle to answer those questions clearly and succinctly. And there is a really great Albert Einstein quote you may have heard. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. So that's what we started doing. The second thing is that we made our metrics absolutely clear to everyone, and we made sure that they understood what we were trying to accomplish. And the third is that we became very disciplined about using project management approaches and tools. We have several people on staff with project management certifications, and they've held classes to spread that knowledge throughout the staff. I would say we're well on our way to meeting 3 of the 4 criterion in this category, but a big challenge is decision-making, because it is really hard to establish roles, and there is confusion about what a project manager, a project sponsor, and a subject matter expert does. In addition to just having cross-departmental work it's hard to track accountability. We're still working on that. So in conclusion, I would describe us as second semester freshmen. We're still learning the language. We're seeing the gaps that were revealed in that readiness survey play out in the real world. But I would say we're still very enthusiastic because we're starting to get a sense of being able to innovate through a defined process. So I'll stop there and hand it over to Lemmy.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Again, I'm Lemmy McNeely, and I'm ASHA, the American Speech Language Hearing Association's Chief Staff Officer for Speech Language Pathology. Innovation is really an important endeavor. We can't keep doing business the way we've been doing business because the world around us has changed and continually changes. So it's really important that we're able to get buy-in from our staff and that we all collaborate and that we're clear about what it is that we're trying to do. We want to have members as well as staff be positively engaged in whatever activities we're looking at and trying. We also want our staff to know that it's okay to try something that may fail. and that they're not going to lose their jobs because that failed. And we really need to make sure that we're able to analyze the aspects of the failures so that we can continue to move forward and either make modifications to that same idea and concept so that it can be a positive change that will happen. But we really want to make sure that if we're telling our staff that we want innovation, they need to trust that they're not going to lose their jobs because something doesn't work out. Now, we definitely want everyone to be sharing their ideas. We've hired very talented individuals at all of our associations, right? So we really want to be able to trust them and that they're going to make good decisions, that they will plan appropriately, and that they will listen to each other. We hire bright and talented individuals, but I really think the sweet spot is when those talented individuals collaborate with each other to gain some successful outcomes. And it's really important that we're able to celebrate those positive activities and celebrate their opportunities for collaborating. A lot of individuals prefer to work in silos, but we really don't find that we're getting the true innovative outcomes that we want when people only work in silos, because then you also have to sell it to someone, right? But if you've involved people from the ground up, then there will already be the buy-in and they won't have to be sold the idea, if you will. So I really think that collaboration is something that's very important. And in order to build collaboration, there has to be trust among each of the staff that are working together collectively. It's certainly important for determining whether or not we are ready to make those innovative changes. And we need to be ready. So we've got a variety of members from different generations who are approaching their memberships in associations differently. They approach what they expect from the benefits that they're going to gain from the different associations that they are affiliating with. And so they really want to see that we are giving them in a transparent way the benefits that they will gain from their membership and their participation in our association. So collaboration, I can't say often enough how important that really is. So thank you. And I think that you will all find that looking at these tools and resources around innovation will guide you to make these challenging decisions. Barry?
Thanks so much. We didn't rehearse this part of it, but boy, did you end on the right note here, Lenny, because collaboration is critical. And I think one of the beauty, and Tom sort of referred to this, is the way that these resources from ASAE can be used, the way the diagnostic tool can be used is as a team. This is not the senior staff taking a survey and then telling everybody else, oh, we have to do this or that. What Tom demonstrated is if you involve your team, they're part of the diagnostic exercise. Talk about buy-in, right? They're literally together making the determination of where are the strengths and weaknesses in terms of innovation capacity. So you have a consensus that you've built as a process. One of the cool things too about the instrument is if you apply it broadly, as we did, Tom, in your organization, where I think we had 15 or 20 people take the survey. What was interesting, as I recall, was there were two of the lower scoring domains. And what we realized is that while you had a low score, was that one had congealed. Everybody knew this was a weaknesses. You could determine from the survey results that there was agreement that you had to work on it. There was another one that didn't necessarily have that amount of consensus. So the diagnostic tool can be used to determine not just collectively where you are with an innovation domain, but it can share with you any gaps that exist within your level of deviation from agreement. And then well, where do you start? Well, I think, Tom, you would agree, you start with the one that you're already aligned on. Start with the the easier win. Okay, we all know we need to improve this area. It's not our worst area. It's up in the middle or near the top, but let's make some success right away. Let's move the needle on that particular domain. And that's what's really powerful. I think in closing, we're getting to the end, Lemmy. I guess we have just a minute to promote the upcoming other sessions. We can show the slide of that. We have one next week, which very much on purpose, we determined it was very important to talk about agile governance. You heard from every speaker today how often frustrating it is. Definitely my own experience has been frustrating sometimes of getting the governance system to keep pace with an energy level for innovation that may exist within the organization. So this is going to be an important conversation. The format's going to be more engaged. We're going to have a panel discussion. We're going to have breakout groups. There's going to be time to answer your questions and respond to your input. This is going to be a true workshop. So together we can move the needle and help every participating organization come back to their organization with a plan, how we can move the organization forward and add more agility to the governance model. So I think that closes the day, Lemmy. I think we're very pleased that you were joining us.
So thank you to each of the presenters, Barry for leading us through this, Tom, Francesca, Randy, thank you. And to the audience for your time of paying attention to ways that you will be able to utilize innovation in your organizations. And please plan to participate in the other webinars that are part of the 4-part series. Thank you.